Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Starting Five here on HMTV6. I'm Mark Keller, sports editor of the Herald-Mail newspaper, joined this segment by Bob Parcelletti to my left, sports writer for the Herald-Mail, longtime beat writer for the Hagerstown Suns here for us. And since we last spoke to Bob a couple weeks back, the Suns were kind of behind the eight ball in the South Atlantic League Northern Division. First half standings, trailing Hickory for the first half title, and of course now we know how that turned out. They end up winning the first half by a half a game, Bob. And what sort of happened down the stretch there that got them over the top?
Well, they played Lakewood in the end, and Lakewood was one of the weaker teams in the division. That helped, and Hickory hit a point that I think that Hagerstown hit earlier that put them behind the eight ball. Hagerstown had a three game lead when they headed out of town to go to Asheville and Lexington, and they got swept out in those series. And they went on a losing streak that took them from 3 games up to behind, and then they had to fight back, and things just kind of worked out the right way.
And the Suns end up as big Delmarva Shorebirds fans. They go down to the final day of the first half and need Delmarva to beat Hickory, and Delmarva did just that.
It's not the first time it's happened for the Suns. It was back in the late 90s when they were the Blue Jays affiliate, and they were in a battle with Cape Fear, and it came down to the last game. They ended up playing like 3 doubleheaders in the last week, played like 10 games, and ended up winning, and it ended up being a doubleheader sweep by Charleston, beating Cape Fear that gave them the title. So it's almost the same.
And it kind of looks like the Suns were sort of helped by some rainouts. They end up finishing the first half with 1 fewer win than Hickory had, but they played fewer games, so they end up with a higher winning percentage. Kind of a strange sort of thing that they don't make up those games that might help decide the first half title.
Well, part of that is because of the travel. I mean, in major leagues, they'll find ways to get those games played. In the minors, because they're restricted by the traveling and all that, and there's not very many open days for them to move around. You either play them at the other site when you play them again, or you forget about them. And they got in a situation where 3 games they had to forget about.
And of course, now the Suns started in the second half on a high note. They're in the battle with the same 2 teams, Hickory and West Virginia, hanging right there at the top. And so now, what happens with the Suns? Should the Suns win the second half title, how do they decide the other team that gets into the playoffs?
Well, usually it's the best overall record for the second team. And if that ends up being a tie, then they go through a couple of tiebreakers. It's a divisional play for those teams. So Hagerstown's in. That's all that counts. Hagerstown gets home field advantage for the first best of 3 because of winning the first half. So they're in a pretty good position. They haven't been in this position a long, long time here, and it's kind of interesting to see what might happen.
Yeah, nice to see them sitting in the in the driver's seat, as it were, already knowing that they're going to be playing in the postseason. They had a couple players, 6 players actually, in the All-Star game. Tony Renda probably had the best game of the bunch in there. He's become the Suns' top hitter, and I guess that's what they expected from him, a number 2 or a second-round draft pick. But he's currently 15th in the league in hitting. He's been sort of a spark for them all year, hasn't he?
Well, Trip Keister, the manager of the Suns, said the team will go as far as Tony takes them. And to be honest with you, he's the guy that makes them run. He's the leadoff hitter, and he puts them in a lot of situations for those guys down below. Suns are not a team that hits a lot of home runs. I guess they're aggressive or passive-aggressive maybe, because they do a lot of things that put a lot of pressure on the other teams, try to force them into making mistakes, and they've really eaten teams alive by forcing their hands. And Renda's one of the big reasons why. I mean, he has between walks and hits, he's been on base 116 times, and he's scored 88 of them. So that's 67% of the time he's on base, he scores. So I think that says a lot for what he does for this team.
And the Suns are 4th in the South Atlantic League in hitting, in batting average, but they have only 2 guys in the top 50 individually. Sean Pleffner, the other, is 26th right now, and so yet they're 4th in the league. How are they doing that without guys up in that upper echelon of individual hitters?
Well, they take advantage of things, like I said. I mean, they steal bases. They're very good situational hitters. They've been drilled, it seems like, to make contact and to take 2 strike accounts and make something out of them. They're not afraid to lay down a bunt, and on the professional level, guys forgot how to bunt, and guys forget how to play them and to play those situations. And the Suns have really made a big difference out of being able to lay the ball down 3 feet in front of the plate.
Now, we've mentioned a lot this year about them not being a real power team, but one guy that has shown some power, Brandon Miller, hit his 14th home run of the season the other day, and he's now 6th in the league in home runs. Only 2 other players on the roster, though, with more than 2 home runs, and Miller as well on the opposite side, the negative side, you can say, 94 strikeouts. Is he sort of that prototypical power hitter, the swing hard in case you hit it sort of thing?
Well, he's had trouble early. He struck out a lot early, and he started taking off after he took some extra batting practice, and they started getting him to look the other way, kind of looking to make contact. So he's not striking out as much now. A lot of those strikeouts were early, and his average really suffered. But he's come back, and I mean, you consider he's got 14 of their 35 home runs. That's what, 28% of them, or actually 40% of them, and that says a lot. And that says a lot for the style of play that the Suns have.
Let's kind of look at Hickory and Hagerstown, kind of compare the two. I mean, because they've been battling with them, and it looks like they're going to battle them here for the second half as well. And home runs, a huge difference there. 115 home runs for Hickory to 35 for the Suns, but Hickory's also struck out 250 times more than the Suns. And with all those home runs, Hickory's only scored 4 runs more than the Suns all season, and they've actually played 3 games more than Hagerstown. So that's kind of a wash, isn't it? I mean, how do you compare the two? What's the difference here?
I think with all the home runs, Hickory's basically guaranteeing themselves probably 3 runs a game. They're basically getting a home. I figure home runs on the average are 2-run homers. So you figure they're averaging about a homer and a half a game right now. It gives them 3 runs to play with right off the bat, and they can come at any time. With the Suns, they have to construct things. They really, I mean, you look at them the other day, they scored 5 runs in an inning against West Virginia, and it took like 3 walks, a hit by pitch, and a 3-run double, and a couple of sac flies to get people in. So, I mean, they run things in a string. They string things together in order to make things happen, where these guys can do it all in one swing of the bat. Now, the thing about it is, they're in the minor leagues. This isn't going to be like the Orioles and Nationals where they ride those guys out. If these guys keep putting up numbers and hitting home runs, they're going to get promoted, and it's going to change the dynamic of Hickory immensely.
Right. Well, still big news on the stadium front coming up here in the near future. Fredericksburg looking like it's moving forward in its pursuit of the Suns. They're holding a special meeting on Monday with Suns principal owner Bruce Quinn that will be open to the public, so we'll kind of get an idea of where things are headed there as well. More big news for the Suns. Christian Benford, a Hagerstown native, will be pitching here in Hagerstown Thursday night against the Suns, so make sure you come out for that. Tim Kelby will be here to talk about that soon. We'll be right back on the Starting 5.